It's something you find a lot of commonality among different hunter-gatherers from different parts of the world. It's they look at the world as a really safe place, a place that provides, a place where there's plenty. It's not a scarcity-based worldview, which is what we've had since agriculture, right? Where if it's a zero-sum scarcity-based, there's not enough for everyone, you got to fight to get yours.
I'm sorry, when you say zero-sum, what do you mean by that?
Okay, zero-sum is like if you and I have to share a beer, as opposed to there's plenty of beer. So the more beer you drink, the less I'm going to get.
I gotcha.
So there's zero. At the end, there's zero.
Yeah.
Right? So you get more, I get less.
Got it.
In the hunter-gatherer world, that's not the way it works, right? That's the way it works in an agricultural world where you've got a harvest, and that harvest has to last till the next harvest, which is a year later generally. So you got to get through the winter.
Right.
And so we're going to split up this harvest, and there ain't going to be enough. So, you got to struggle to get higher on the hierarchy. You got to protect what's yours. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the world we live in, and we sort of assume that that's the way it's always been. So you've got this sort of Hobbesian worldview of prehistory that, before the state, life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
Awful.
Bullshit, all down the wrong. They're all wrong, right?
Yeah.
But that's because we're projecting the modern sense of what life is into prehistory, where there weren't things like supermarkets and so on. So we say, oh, everyone was starving because there were no supermarkets in prehistory. Completely scientifically ridiculous.
Right.
But it's a natural way to look at things. All right, so wait a minute. The thing about prehistory, just to finish that line of thought. So, okay, I mean, I won't bore your listeners with all sorts of technical shit. They can find it in the book, right? But the amount of time people spent working is much less than us.
Yes.
The nutritional value of the food dropped precipitously with the advent of agriculture.
Wow.
You look all over the world, average height in the Fertile Crescent, which is where agriculture first came about. Average height of men was about 5'10" before agriculture. It was about 5'2" 500 years later.
Wow.
You can see in bones, even 50,000-year-old bones, but we're talking about 10,000 or less because of agriculture popped up around the world at different times. You look at the bones, you can see that people suffered from famines. You can see they after agriculture. You can see they suffered from nutritional deficiencies after agriculture, from the teeth, their pits in the teeth and so on. So this is demonstrated. No archaeologist would argue that point, that hunter-gatherers had better nutrition and suffered less hunger than the farmers who came after them, and better nutrition than most of the people alive today on Earth.
Wow.
That's not disputed. So you've got nutrition, you've got hours spent working. Then the other thing you said was, hope we don't wander into someone else's territory.
Yes.
And, prehistoric war, constant wars,
Sure.
Steven Pinker's bullshit.
Yes.
Wrong. 70,000 years ago, there was a huge volcanic eruption at Lake Toba in Sumatra. Wiped out most of the world's human population. We know this from genetic testing. There was a bottleneck at that point. There were probably about 2,000 breeding couples on Earth. Okay? On Earth.
That's crazy.
So the odds of you wandering into another tribe's territory are, from zero to nothing. Because there weren't any other people.
Right.
Right? Human beings spread through the world very recently into new territories. Very, very recently in terms of evolutionary time. And think about what we are. We're an animal that can eat anything. So the idea that our ancestors were starving, they've got control of fire, they've got complex social organizations, they're more intelligent than any other animal on the planet, and the planet's a big empty salad bowl.
There's nothing but your connection with the earth. Now, cut to the present moment. What do we have? We have people who work 2-3 jobs, 80 hours a week, 70 insane hours
to survive.
Just to survive and to barely survive. And they get maybe a week, 12 hours of free time when they're not completely asleep or drunk or trying to blot out the horror of their existence. So we've gone from this kind of pure, beautiful modality to something that if you brought someone from this time that you're talking about and showed them, I don't know, a cubicle farm and said, this is what people do now, they would probably think that they'd been taken by a demon into one of the levels of hell. They'd probably think that they're witnessing the most awful thing that they've ever seen in their life.
You know what? There are real-world cases of that, where hunter-gatherers are taken to modern society. And, you know, we talk about some interesting cases of that in the book and their responses to it. There's a very poignant example is that on the Beagle, you know, the famous trip that Darwin took around South America, where he came up with these theories that led to this revolutionary understanding of evolution and time and everything. The captain of the boat had been through Tierra del Fuego before, and they picked up 3 Fuegians from the Tierra del Fuego. The tribe was called Fuegians by the English anyway, and 3 kids, and brought them back to England to educate them in the proper British understanding of the world, and how to eat at the table, and, you know, how to read and write and all that. And then on the ship that Darwin was on, they took them back down to, you know, reintroduce them to their tribe so that they could teach people how to live correctly and, you know, farm and build houses and so on. Jemmy, I can't remember the name. One of them was named Jemmy, but we talk about it in the book. Anyway, so they dropped them off there. They built before they left, the British left, they built a garden and huts and sort of set them up in a little village kind of situation and left them food and everything. And then it was a mapping expedition. So they went and did some mapping along the coast and came back a couple months later. Nobody was there. So they were really concerned. What happened to these, you know, our friends? And they went looking for them. Finally, after a few days, they found them. They were back living, you know, up in the jungle with the tribe. Yeah. And they got Jemmy and they brought him down and took him to the ship and dressed him up in his clothes and sat him down for dinner. And Darwin writes in his journal that he was very pleased to see that Jemmy still remembered how to use a knife and fork and all that. And they said to him, you know, hey, what's going on? And he said, oh, come on, you know, we don't want to farm. There are plenty of birdies, plenty of fishies. Right? And that's what happens over and over again. There's a famous case of an anthropologist saying to a Kung tribesman in the Kalahari I was talking about earlier, like, yeah, why don't you guys farm? You know, you could farm. And he says, the world is full of mongongo nuts. Why would I farm? You people are nuts. Yeah. You know, so you get this over and over again when you have interactions with tribal people and traditional pre-agricultural societies. They're not interested in learning to farm. They don't want this life that we're trying to sell them constantly. Right. So in the marketplace of ideas, where the rubber meets the road, where people have a choice, in frontier North America, there are hundreds of cases of Indians capturing women and children, on the frontier, bringing them back to the tribe as slaves, essentially, right? Yes. But then the way Indians dealt with it, you were integrated into the tribe. Right. You'd be married, you'd have a partner, you'd have kids, and so the women and the children would then get recaptured by the whites, rescued, brought back to town. Yeah. As soon as they could, they'd slip off into the night and wander back into the tribe. Yeah, so people who've seen both sides, they always pick the other side.
How can people find you? This is, by the way, thank you so much for coming to my house and recording this. This is my favorite one for sure. This is incredible. Great. You've melted my brain. Even more than your book. Of course, I should have expected
that. I can see it oozing out of your ears.
Yeah, there's parts of my brain coming out of my ears now. It's so cool. What's your website?
sexatdawn.com.